Hi and welcome again to Tales from the Gulag, my case against the ALP. And if you've been following this series, you'll notice that my red and white Where's Wally polo shirt has now become a black and white, shall we say, I know where Wally is shirt. But anyway, that aside, part 7 is my case against the ALP. It is Labor's war on Australia. One of my early wake-up moments was in year 12 in high school when I was studying modern European history. The topic was the unification of Germany from the Napoleonic Wars to 1871. In 1815, Germany was a conglomeration of free states, independent monarchies and principalities, with a dominant kingdom in the north, the Kingdom of Prussia, centred around Berlin, that came out on the winning side of the Napoleonic Wars. The unification process worked like this. First came a customs union, where the member states would allowed free trade with each other with no tariffs, and then came the monetary union, and then a military union, and then following the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, the German Empire, the Second Reich, was formed. I saw a connection here. I predicted that Europe was headed the same way, because at that time, Europe was a customs union, which was headed towards having a common currency, and hot diggity, there is now a military union with moves to have a European army, and there is already a European Parliament, a rubber stamp organisation to implement the policies of the European Commission, which is made up of non-elected officials and intellectuals who know better than the common masses what's right. And so, yes, there was a move to one gigantic state run by an unelected elite. No wonder breakfast was successful, except, of course, that now the Brexiteers are finding that actually getting out is not so easy. Now, to Labor's war on Australia, I suggest that it happens on three fronts. One is to give away our sovereignty to international bodies dominated by foreign interests that have no interest in Australia as a nation. The second is to destroy the traditional Australian culture by altering the demographics of the country, and third, by destroying the symbols and values that bind us together. And this is true not only for Australia, but right across the democracies of the Western world. First, giving away our national sovereignty. This has been going on for a long time, and also with the complicity of Liberal governments, to be fair. Now, of course, the world is a smaller place, and events on the other side of the world are going to be more significant than they would have been in the past. So, to be sure, there is a legitimate place where we make agreements with other countries on matters that are of common interest. And so, therefore, there is a legitimate place to have forums to discuss these matters. What readily comes to mind, of course, is the United Nations. The UN has had a checkered history right from the start, but the ongoing weakness of the institution is its dominance by nations that have little or no interest in human rights. There has always been a dominance by communist countries, but now the biggest single voting bloc is the OIC, the Organisation for Islamic Cooperation, a bloc of 57 mostly Islamic countries, which is dedicated to the advance of Islam around the world, whose member nations' human rights record is at best dodgy and for the most part simply appalling. Or there are the various free trade agreements such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which President Donald Trump rather rightly pulled his country out of, because these sorts of agreements sign away our sovereignty to multinational corporations of all things. I don't deny the value of free trade, provided it is genuine free trade. Or again, my attention was recently drawn to the Cape Preston project in Western Australia by an ad for Clive Palmer's United Australia Party, which I checked out, and it turned out this ad was pretty correct. The Cape Preston iron mining project is owned and run by Sinai Iron, a company that is in fact controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. This was signed off by the then Labor state government and by the Foreign Investment Review Board under the then federal Labor government. This includes a deep water port and an airfield, again owned by the Chinese government. And for that matter, West Australian Labor Senator Pierre Wang was born in China and was a member of the Communist Party, and he has recruited 500 Communist Chinese members into the Labor Party. Yes, it seems that Labor absolutely loves the Chinese Communists. The Chinese government plans to achieve the status of being the world's #1 power by 2040, and it seems that Labor is quite happy to help them along. From my days as a young Christian, I have been wary of moves towards a one-world government, and I suggest that you should be too. 2,000 years ago, the Bible predicted such a move, and it tells us how that place would not be a happy one. It would be a place racked by war, famine, disease, where the faithful would be persecuted with everything at the state's disposal. This is the reign of the Antichrist. And make no mistake, as a socialist organisation, the Labor Party's vision for us is of such a world. Oh yes, they dress it up nice and pretty, but they dream of a one-world international government hell-bent on creating this workers' paradise. But such an earthly paradise will be an earthly hell for everybody, maybe except for the 1%. Now, of course, the good news is that God is still in control and will work within history, as he always has, to bring about his kingdom. The good news is that the Antichrist have a 7-year use-by date. The bad news is that those 7 years will be rough for everybody. So, go back to Karl Marx. To achieve this workers' paradise, they have to destroy Western culture, the family, and the church. Go read the Communist Manifesto. And what do we see? Well, let me give you a few examples. Recently, there is the United Nations Covenant on Immigration. This covenant effectively signs away the rights of nations to control who comes into their countries. And rest assured, the signatories like Honduras, Egypt, Syria won't have to worry about Australians knocking at their borders wanting to come in, but we will certainly have it the other way around. And this covenant means that we will no longer be able to refuse them or to even criticise the policy. Australia is not yet a signatory, but I suggest watch out. Of course, another method in this war on Australia is multiculturalism, but we need to be careful of what we're actually talking about here. It sounds lovely, as if it does promise a fair go for all, but it is really aimed at demographic change towards people who do not share our common values. Interestingly, when the Labor Party was founded, it used to be the party of the white Australia policy. The argument back then was that the importation of Asian labour would undercut the earnings and conditions of present white workers. It was actually the Liberal government under Sir Robert Menzies that advocated opening up immigration to groups beyond the white British population. And let me be clear, this critique does not advocate a return to the white Australian policy or its likes. I am perfectly fine with living next door to anyone who is a good neighbour. If he is not too noisy at night, if he respects my privacy and we can occasionally say hi to each other, then it's fine. I don't care where he came from, what he looks like, or even what God he worships as far as how I treat him. And let me push the issue further as some food for thought. I have served as a pastor in 2 multi-ethnic congregations. One of them represented 14 different nationalities, including groups that, because of history, had every reason not to get on with each other, but they did. Because what drew them together was our common bond through Jesus Christ. Do you get it? There was something bigger than us that drew us together. That is our faith in him. But the problem is, when you import people en masse who are antithetical to our own culture and way of life, while denigrating our own, this is what Labor really means by multiculturalism, and that I am against. Because of the aim of these policies is to undermine the underlying culture, and for that you need to go back to Karl Marx and the Communist Manifesto and to create a division within the society, because a divided house cannot stand. And this explains why they talk about the compassionate needs of importing refugees but are fixated on importing Muslims. This is why, when ISIS was beheading Christians in Iraq and Syria, Labor opposed Tony Abbott's suggestion that we bring Christians from Syria to give them refuge, claiming that this was racist. No, it's not compassion. It is not even economics that drives Labor's immigration preferences, but it is their desire for power from those who will create division and help destroy our own culture. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with who they worship. It has nothing to do with what a people looks like. The third front in Labor's war on Australia is also the destruction of our cultural symbols and history. Whether it be the flag, the Lord's Prayer, Christmas, whatever, Labor wants them gone because they want the culture behind them gone. Right now it is the attack on Australia Day, the commemoration of the arrival of the First Fleet in 1788, and it's on the excuse that the Aborigines are offended by what they like to term Invasion Day, or at least the activists do. True, the activists are offended by it, but from what I pick up, most Aboriginal people couldn't care less. And here is the danger as I see it, or a part of what I think well illustrates how all of this works. Leftists like to say that Islamic terrorism will be dealt with by some kind of reformation within Islam. The problem is, reformation to what? They argue that Christendom had a reformation in the 16th century, and it certainly did. But that reformation was a call for the church to sweep out the man-made stuff and to return to her biblical roots. But okay, we want to have Islam morph into something less militant? Great. But how? Reform to what? To Western values of liberty, freedom of speech, of a fair go for all? That would be fantastic if it happened. But are they seriously proposing to help Muslims become more westernised by bashing Western culture, by calling white men toxic? I don't think so, especially when traditional Muslims find many aspects of leftist secularist culture deeply offensive and want no part of it. Consider the recent Muslim protest in England by 600 Muslims against their children being forced into the UK equivalent of safe schools. And in that one, I for one am in total sympathy. Or there is the story of Asad Shah of Glasgow, which illustrates pretty well the problem here. Asad Shah was a newsagent and an Ahmadi Muslim. Ahmadis reject the notion of violent jihad. He was much loved by his local community, and in 2016 he placed a post on his Facebook page that wished a happy Easter and Good Friday to his Christian friends. He said, "Let's follow the real footstep of beloved holy Jesus Christ and get the real success in both worlds." For that, he was murdered by his Muslim buddies. He was a man who simply wanted to get in peace, so yes, they do exist, but he was not allowed to do so because he was not considered to be Muslim enough, because he had Christians as friends. And this is what Labor wants to import. No. The ALP likes to talk pro-Australia and pro-Australian values, but their vision is actually to totally undermine them so that they can pursue their socialist, globalist agenda. And in this, they must be opposed.